Picture this: you wake up, check the news, and your country's leader has just crowned himself president for life, no vote. No warning, just congrats, you're stuck with me. Sounds like a joke, right? For Uganda in 1971, it was terrifyingly real, and the punchline's name was Idi Amin Dada. So, grab your seatbelt, let's dive in. The rise of a dictator. Idi Amin was born in 1925 in the small town of Kiboko, Uganda, into a modest family. His early life was far removed from the grandeur and self-importance he would later project with elaborate military uniforms, flashy medals, and a flair for self-glorification that could rival a Hollywood action star. Even as a young man, Amin was ambitious and fearless, traits that would later propel him to power and sometimes land him in bizarre situations that could only be described as darkly comedic if the stakes weren't so deadly. He joined the King's African Rifles, the British colonial army, and quickly rose through the ranks. Promotions came fast. Amin's energy, ruthlessness, and relentless ambition made him a standout figure. By the time Uganda gained independence in 1962, Amin had secured a position of influence in the military, earning respect and fear among colleagues. He was disciplined, strategic, and, according to accounts, almost completely devoid of empathy when it came to human suffering. His mix of bravado and brutality would come to define his later rule. In 1971, Amin executed a military coup against President Milton Obote, seizing power almost overnight. The coup was surprisingly bloodless, though bloodless is relative when fear and intimidation are already rampant. Initially, many Ugandans welcomed Amin, hopeful that a military coup would bring stability and progress, or at the very least, some excitement in an otherwise politically stagnant country. But Amin had other plans, and the honeymoon period was short-lived. Almost immediately, his leadership style emerged as erratic, violent, and grandiose. Think less statesman and more self-declared emperor with delusions of grandeur. The reign of terror. Once in power, Amin's true nature emerged in full force. He declared himself president for life, and by life, he apparently meant that anyone perceived as a threat to his power had a drastically shortened one. Political opponents vanished overnight, and anyone suspected of disloyalty or even whispering mild criticism was tortured, killed, or disappeared. Estimates suggest that between 100,000 and 500,000 people died under his regime. To put it bluntly, Amin ruled with a mix of paranoia, cruelty, and almost theatrical flair. One of his most infamous acts came in 1972, when he expelled Uganda's entire Asian community, giving them just 90 days to leave. Amin claimed that Asians were exploiting Uganda's economy, but the truth was more sinister. It was a bold, opportunistic grab to consolidate power and seize control of businesses. The move decimated Uganda's economy, but in Amin's eyes, he was the heroic savior of his nation. In one of his most infamous press statements, he even called himself the conqueror of the British Empire, a declaration that simultaneously stunned and terrified the world. Amin's reign was also filled with bizarre absurdities. He promoted friends and loyalists to ludicrous ranks, gave himself titles like Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin, President for Life, Conqueror of the British Empire, and even reportedly claimed to have killed more people than any other African leader in history, then laughed about it. These moments could be darkly comedic if you didn't consider the lives lost and the fear that gripped an entire nation. International reactions. The world watched Amin with a mix of horror, disbelief, and, in some corners, awkward admiration. Countries like Libya and North Korea offered support, seeing him as a fellow authoritarian ally. Meanwhile, nations such as the United States and the United Kingdom condemned his actions but largely refrained from direct intervention. Cold War dynamics played a role. Amin's unpredictability made him both a convenient ally and a dangerous wildcard. Diplomacy with him was like juggling flaming swords while blindfolded. One wrong move, and the entire region could erupt into chaos. In 1978, Amin made a fateful decision. He invaded Tanzania, sparking a conflict that would ultimately become the undoing of his regime. Tanzania, backed by Ugandan exiles, mounted a counteroffensive that culminated in the capture of Kampala in April 1979. Amin fled to Saudi Arabia, where he would spend the rest of his life in exile, effectively ending one of the most infamous dictatorships of the 20th century. His departure left behind a nation scarred by terror, economic collapse, and political upheaval, but also a population that had survived and would rebuild. The absurdities of power. Even amid violence and oppression, Amin's reign had moments so absurd they could have been lifted from a dark comedy script. For instance, he once declared war on Israel because he felt snubbed at an international summit, a decision that shocked diplomats and journalists alike. He would challenge opponents to duels, claim credit for inventions that never existed, and hold press conferences filled with bizarre anecdotes. From a safe distance, Amin's antics can almost seem laughable. Imagine telling your friends, "Yesterday, our president declared himself the king of the British Empire and challenged the prime minister to a wrestling match." If it weren't true, you'd think it was the plot of a Netflix satire. Yet, for Ugandans living under his rule, the absurdity was a dangerous reminder of the unpredictability and volatility of his power. Resistance and resilience. Despite the terror, Ugandans refused to surrender entirely. Secret networks, underground movements, and courageous individuals maintained hope. Some risked their lives to document atrocities, others provided shelter for the vulnerable, and a few organized uprisings. While these acts rarely toppled Amin directly, they kept the spirit of resistance alive. Humor became a survival mechanism. Citizens whispered jokes about Amin, crafted subtle satirical rhymes, and exchanged sly quips in marketplaces. These small acts of levity were tiny sparks of rebellion, proving that even under severe oppression, the human spirit could laugh in defiance. The economic collapse. Amin's policies were disastrous for Uganda's economy. The expulsion of the Asian business community led to empty shops, halted trade, and a nationwide shortage of essential goods. Factories shut down, and foreign investment vanished almost overnight. Amin's mismanagement was compounded by corruption, nepotism, and his own extravagant spending on military parades, personal luxuries, and bizarre self-promotions. Yet, he continued to present himself as Uganda's savior, a tragicomic image that enraged many while bewildering the international community. Lessons from a tyrant. Amin's rule is a stark example of the dangers of unchecked power. Families were torn apart, businesses collapsed, and psychological scars lingered for decades. Yet his reign also highlights the resilience of ordinary people who survived, resisted, and eventually rebuilt their country. Modern Uganda views Amin with a mix of fear, anger, and historical reflection. His regime serves as a cautionary tale for governments worldwide. Unchecked authority, corruption, and delusion of grandeur can devastate a nation. For storytellers and historians, Amin's life is a goldmine of material, a story full of horror, absurdity, and human resilience. The enduring symbolism. Beyond the political and economic consequences, Amin's story carries a symbolic weight. He represents the extremes of human ambition unchecked by morality. His reign shows that charisma and fear can control populations, but only until collective action, courage, and resilience rise to challenge it. The humor and absurdity embedded in his rule's strange proclamations, self-bestowed titles, and public eccentricities illustrate how madness and power often intertwine. For educators, storytellers, and historians, these absurdities provide a vehicle to engage audiences, teaching lessons about power, psychology, and resilience in an accessible, human-centered way. In short, Idi Amin's story is a chilling reminder of how power without conscience leads to destruction. His reign mixed brutality with absurdity, leaving Uganda scarred but unbroken. Yet through the darkness, courage and even humor endured. His legacy teaches us that the strongest stories in nations are born from the balance of tragedy, resilience, and the will to never forget. And that's the wild, unbelievable story of Idi Amin's reign of fear, a dark chapter packed with madness, power, and a pinch of "you can't make this up." If you enjoyed this dive into history's most jaw-dropping video, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another crazy story from the past.